Muhammad tells you that, you should always give what's best for your daughter. And me as a father, I'm just trying to give my daughter the opportunity to be able to see life from a wider angle and a bigger perspective. All right?
People would immigrate into different parts of the country, but what was interesting is that they would all manage to find their way into Dearborn, a great many of them. And the reason for that is because the mosques were in place.
Dearborn's newest mosque will be the largest in North America. Like the first mosque in Medina, it is being built with help from the entire community.
As you're looking around this area,
there's great feelings of ownership to the mosque when the community builds it. People are baking food. Every year they contribute between $50,000 to $100,000 to the income and the operating costs of our mosques. So we have the building of this mosque, kind of metaphorically, and the laying of the bricks and this new foundation with all these new immigrants in Dearborn. And everybody brings their contribution.
Prophet Muhammad established the first center in Medina for Muslims, and that was his mosque. And it was not only a place where Muslims go and do their prayer or offer their supplication. It was the center for the entire community. It was the headquarters of the Prophet. He would become a judge and solve problems among people inside the mosque. So he receives delegations. He would declare war or peace. The mosque was serving multiple purposes in the life of Prophet Muhammad.
It was at the mosque that Muhammad discussed a sweeping change in policy with his followers. After years of exercising restraint in the face of persecution by the Meccans, Muhammad received a clear new revelation that marked a dramatic departure from the past. It gave the Muslims limited permission to take up arms in self-defense. The statesman was about to become a general.
For 13 years, there's been no sanction to fight. Then a revelation comes that says those who have been removed unjustly from their homes and have been fought because of their religious beliefs are sanctioned to fight, to defend themselves.
Killing is always abhorrent. The Quran makes it very clear about that. And the Quran says that it's always wrong to start a war, to be an aggressor. But persecution is worse than killing. When people have been driven from their homes or deprived of their basic human rights, or when an evil ideology comes into the world, sometimes, regrettably, it may be necessary to fight, and sometimes lives will be lost.
Muhammad's first large military engagement occurred near the town of Badr, when 313 Muslims set out to surprise a caravan from Muhammad's own tribe, the Quraysh.
In a sense, the Battle of Badr, which became such a landmark in Muslim history, was a sort of mistake. The Muslims had planned a conventional raid, but the Meccans, when they heard that this band of renegades was attacking their great caravan, were so enraged they sent out the whole army against them. And the Muslims were convinced that they were going to die.
He never wanted to fight the Meccans. I mean, the Meccans are his people, his friends, his family. He wants to co-opt them. He wants to make them the key, if you will, to the new Islamic Ummah that he's trying to form. So he doesn't want to go to war with them.
As he prepared to lead the Muslims into battle, Muhammad took the unprecedented step of establishing clear rules of engagement for his army.
He makes it very clear to his soldiers that if they have the right to use force against the Qurayshis, that does not mean that they will do the same thing that has been done in pre-Islamic wars, in which women and children could be killed, in which no prisoners could be taken, no quarter given. No. He said Islam is a religion of law.
The Meccans had sent an army of about 1,000 men. As the army approached, Muhammad prepared to make a stand near a well. One of his soldiers suddenly questioned his strategy. "Has God revealed it to you?" he asked, "or is it your own opinion?" When Muhammad answered that he was speaking as a man, not a prophet, the soldier suggested that they stop at a larger well closer to the enemy so they could deprive them of water. Muhammad agreed at once. The change in strategy proved decisive, and the Muslims recorded a resounding triumph.
It was a victory that stunned the Muslims. It seemed like a complete reversal, like a miracle, almost a sort of revelation of God in history. A furqan, they called it, something that separated the just from the unjust.
After the battle, Muhammad received a revelation claiming the victory for God. The Muslims felt that angels had been fighting alongside them. The victory reaffirmed their belief that God was on their side and raised Muhammad's status higher still. But his followers also knew that the Meccans would seek violent retribution. A year later, an army of 3,000 Meccans returned to face 1,000 Muslims in the Battle of Uhud. The resulting rout left the future of Islam in mortal peril.
It was a horrible battle, and the corpses of the Muslims were mutilated by the Meccans, and the Meccan women, as was their wont, came out onto the battlefield and danced around the corpses.
Many of Muhammad's soldiers lost their lives in the battle, including a rabbi who had honored the Medina Pact by fighting alongside Muhammad. The families of the fallen Muslims were now without protectors. Then, Muhammad received a new revelation, allowing Muslim men to safeguard these women and children by taking as many as 4 wives, but only if they could treat them equally.
That in itself, in the context of Arabia, was a bit of a restriction because a man could have unlimited number of wives. The context of the permission to polygamy is to say who is going to look after these women. And it was an act of faith, not an act of lust, that inspired men to take more wives. So it would be wrong to think of the Prophet as basking decadently in a garden of sensual delights with his harem. His harem was very much a matter of state, and sometimes his wives were rather a mixed blessing.
Although Muhammad was monogamous during Khadija's life, after her death, he eventually married a number of women, including one of the Uhud widows, Salama.
The reason for his marriages were really political alliances. It was a tribal society, and for Muhammad to marry into another tribe and to take a wife just meant that there was a bond being created with this tribe.
Among Muhammad's wives were the daughters of his 2 closest allies, Abu Bakr and Omar. Abu Bakr's daughter, Aisha, would become one of the most influential women in his life.
Aisha was very lively. She was brilliant. She was somebody that questioned the Prophet. She was not somebody in any way that took everything. She questioned him. She said, "What does that mean? Why did you do this? Why did you do that?" She was somebody that really had an incredibly active mind. She memorized vast amounts of prophetic traditions, and she's considered to be actually the transmitter of a large number of traditions from the Prophet Muhammad.
In the year that followed the Battle of Uhud, the Meccans girded themselves for a final assault that they hoped would finish off the Muslims once and for all. They assembled one of the largest armies ever seen in Arabia and marched on Medina. But Muhammad hit upon a daring defense.
Muhammad has dug a trench around the whole of the settlement. And you have an almost comic scene with the Meccan cavalry galloping up to this trench and pulling back in horror and saying, "What is this?" They've never seen anything so unsporting in their lives. This is something, they say, the Arabs don't do. It sounds comical, but surrounded by the powerful Meccan army, the Muslims were expecting all to be killed, to a man, to a woman.
Stopped by the trench around Medina, the Meccans laid siege to the city and to the hundreds of Muslim families trapped inside. According to Muslim sources, in their determination to defeat Muhammad, the Meccans had recruited as allies many Bedouin tribes, as well as the largest Jewish tribe within Medina, the Bani Qurayza. For the Muslims, this defection was the final blow in a relationship that had been strained from the beginning.
When Muhammad came to town, the organized Jewish community did not accept his prophecy. There were, according to the Islamic sources, some individual Jews that did accept him. But for the most part, the community as a whole did not.
If the Jews would accept his prophethood, then he has tremendous and complete confirmation of his prophethood. But the Jews were so well respected that when they rejected his prophethood, and they did it actively, they became a very serious political threat to his very existence in Medina.
Despite the aid of the Bani Qurayza, the Meccan siege could not break through the Muslim defenses. When the weather turned bad, the Bedouin tribes began deserting the field of battle. The Meccans themselves lost heart and departed, abandoning their Jewish allies to be tried by the Muslims for the crime of treason.
Islamic sources believe that the Jews did indeed aid the enemy in trying to defeat Muhammad. This was absolutely against the terms of the Medina Agreement.
The Jews and the Muslims decided that they would choose an arbitrator to determine what would be the future of the Jews. The person who was chosen was a man who was mortally wounded in the Battle of the Trench. And so he determined that the women and children of the Banu Qurayza would be taken as slaves to the Muslims, and the men would be killed.
The Prophet agreed with this judgment. When he judged, he said that you have judged according to God and his messenger. And then approximately 700 men were killed. They were executed. So this definitely occurred.
All that can be said is that this cannot be seen as anti-Semitism per se. Muhammad had nothing against the Jewish people per se or the Jewish religion. The Quran continues to tell Muslims to honor the people of the book and to honor their religion as authentic. And the Jewish tribes who had not rebelled, who had not given help to the Meccans, continued to live in Medina completely unmolested. Muhammad was not trying to exterminate Jews. He was trying to get rid of very dangerous internal enemies.
It's unfortunate that many historians, and particularly in contemporary times, both on the Jewish and on the Muslim side, have transformed this. On the Jewish side, they have used that as a way of saying, well, you see, Muslims hate the Jews and they kill them. And on the Muslim side, it says, well, you see, the Jews are full of treachery and can't be trusted. Both are wrong.
When the other tribes of the peninsula saw the impotence of Mecca with all its power and might against this little community, they began to switch allegiance and see that Muhammad was the coming man. Now, once that happened, once the tide had been turned after the Battle of the Trench, and the Muslims were no longer subject to the fear of extermination, Muhammad stopped the fighting.
The Prophet Muhammad received a few people, militants, who just arrived from one of the battles that they came back from, and they felt so important. We finished this job fighting with the enemies of Islam. And the Prophet smiled and he said, let me tell you something. You finished the minor jihad, and now you have the bigger jihad ahead of you. And they were stunned. They thought that they just finished the biggest achievement in their life by being willing to sacrifice their own life. Then the Prophet explained that the biggest jihad is the struggle against your own desires and limitations.
Jihad does not mean holy war, primarily. The word means effort, striving. And it's always a hard struggle to put the word of God into practice. When the Quran talks about struggling, or they're not talking always about fighting a holy war, they're talking about this immense struggle to implement a divine imperative in the flawed and tragic conditions of daily life. Fighting might sometimes have to be done as part of the jihad, but it is by no means the major imperative.
I remember a quotation from Jesus, peace be upon him, who says that the first step in the reformation journey is to start with your own self. If you want to reform the society, you have to reform yourself first. And that's what basically the meaning of jihad.
The Prophet put that emphasis on the inner development, jihad, the constant struggle with yourself to improve yourself and perfect your intent, that you do things only for the sake of God. The most excellent jihad, holy struggle, is the struggle to control your ego, the self. For a long time I was deathly afraid of speaking in public, of giving speeches. And I saw that and, well, this is my jihad. I've got to overcome this fear. If I'm going to help people, it's going to be necessary for me to talk in public, to be able just to speak out. Going back to 1987, I become active as far as writing articles for papers to have fire-safe cigarette legislation enacted. Cigarettes are the largest cause of fire fatalities in the nation. So I began writing, and because of my position, I could speak from the authority as a firefighter and now a supervising fire marshal. Going back to, if you save one life, it's like you saved all humanity. Well, I feel I was part of an effort to save thousands of lives each year because of this legislation that we passed in New York State.
Jihad is misused. There is absolutely nothing in Islam that justifies the claim of Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, or other similar groups to kill innocent civilians. That is unequivocally a crime under Islamic law. Acts of terror violence that have occurred in the name of Islam are not only wrong, they are contrary to Islam.
September 11th, I hooked up with two other fire marshals. We found a place to park near the bridge, about several inches of soot. If it had been white and colder out, you would have sworn it was snow. We came over to Brooklyn Bridge. It was just like something out of a movie. It was very quiet, you know, that muffled sound that you have during a blizzard. You know, you can't hear your feet hitting the ground. It's just very muffled, very quiet. So we put on our turnout gear. We started heading over there, and it's just, I think I could speak for all of it. We were just all in a state of shock and disbelief. I just felt, in the back of my head, please don't be Muslims doing this. And I just felt sick. We could see this fragment of the World Trade Center sticking up almost like a lopsided crown. And we started walking down one way, and we saw some firefighters, dazed and shell-shocked, saying, "Don't go down there, there's still more collapses happening." I mean, we're dying to go out there and do something. And, we're figuring that some of the brothers, or even anyone, people could still be alive, trapped under the rubble. But it was frustrating, but, you have to understand that they don't want to lose more people on top of the people who are lost already. This is just, it's just out-and-out madness what they did. The Prophet himself, because of the circumstances, engaged in battle, in warfare, but he had a certain code of conduct that he followed. So you have to separate fanaticism, which every religion has, from the reality and the truth of that religion. These are fanatics who have lost sight of what the purpose of religion is, and they're acting, on their own. What hurt